everyone. How are you? This is Nina Clark, your host of Nina's Got Good News. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you all so much for showing up and listening to this movement. I hope everyone is doing well, first and foremost. I know that 2020 has been quite a year for all of us, and we're in this together. I truly believe that staying positive and finding some good news right now is more important than ever before. And that's always been the mission of this podcast since we launched it back in 2018. So welcome to podcast number 79, you guys. We made it to 79. I can't believe it. The goal of today's episode is to give all of us hope and inspiration and remind us all how much good there is in the world than we even realize. We could use a lot more of that these days. I know all of us feel that. Wedding photographer Mary Latham drove across all 50 states in her mom's Subaru in search of something positive. Her journey took her 3 years and 31 days, but who's counting? Mary was welcomed into 154 homes by complete strangers, and she documented countless acts of kindness, resilience, selflessness, courage, and charity. All good news approved in my book. She's now putting it all together into a brand new book. Mary Latham joins me now from Long Island. Hi, Mary. Welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Good. How are you? Thank you so much for having me on here.
I know this is so fun. I'm so inspired by your journey and by everything you're doing. I feel so connected to you in this good news world that we both find ourselves in this good, positive space, which is so awesome. But just tell us quickly, like, how are you? Where are you right now? Like, what's going on in your world in this moment?
So I returned off of my road trip at the end of November. So kind of right before the world started shutting down, if you will. And, when I got home, it was funny because everyone was like, oh, it's so amazing. Like, it must have been such a great experience. And it was, by all means. But I definitely felt a little bit like I just got home from war. And, it was really, really challenging. It was a really challenging journey. And also just in general, I feel like it was almost like you were creating this army of like-minded people like yourself who are working really, really hard. And just because we're positive and optimistic doesn't mean that it's not really, really challenging. And it doesn't mean that we're happy all the time. It just means it's a choice every day to kind of focus on that positivity. And so I'm starting to finally feel a little energized again. I was pretty tired and, sleeping in different homes all the time. It's really exciting to have a bed back, have a bed in general. And so I'm kind of just putting all of my notes together now, and it's pretty overwhelming. So we're in that stage of appreciating sleep, but also preparing to kind of put it all together.
Yeah, I know. It's so exciting. But you're right. That transition back home, it's almost like culture shock. So I'm just glad you're getting settled and you're putting this journey on paper for all of us. We can't wait for it to all come to life in the book. So tell us a little bit about your wonderful mom, though. Tell us a little bit. I know she was the inspiration behind all of this, right? This was, basically dedicated to your mom. And I do feel like I know your mom, even though, just by learning more about you and your story and everything you're doing, I feel like now I know her, and she sounds like such an amazing woman. So tell us a little bit about your mom, first of all, and how she was the inspiration for you to even do this journey in the first place.
So yes, she was really the whole project. I was simply the messenger, kind of carried it out. But yeah, she was the best. I'm one of 4 kids. I'm the youngest. And she was an amazing mom. She was an awesome wife. Her and my dad actually worked together. So she worked with him on the family and in the business. So she was pretty much a saint. And she had kind of inspired the project. She was diagnosed with cancer when I was in 7th grade. And in 7th grade, when you hear cancer, you kind of just go into that, they're going to die. Like you don't know what's going to happen. And I was really scared. And I was the only kid home when she was going through her diagnosis. All the other kids had gone off to college by that point. So we got really, really close during that time. And the cancer returned 10 years later. And when it returned, I was living in the city at the time. And I was working at a law firm, just in the online department, kind of health insurance and helping pay my rent kind of job while I did my wedding photography on the weekends. And I was working on the day of the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting. And I had just gotten into work that morning, and I was like opening up my computer, and all of the news was coming out. And it was just had happened. And it was around 9 o'clock. And I remember just staring at it. And we grew up without television in our house. So I think that, it changed. Like when I would see something tragic, I would become obsessed with it, and I would just stare at it. And I wasn't used to seeing the news that often. And so my coworker walked by my desk as I was kind of obsessing and hitting the refresh button. And he had a coffee and said, "Oh, you should have come with me to Starbucks today." And I was ignoring him and was like, "Yeah, I can't afford it this week." And I kept going back to the news. And he said, "No, it was free." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "Yeah, there was a guy in earlier buying gift cards for his employees because it was right before Christmas. And he randomly just got $100 gift card at the end and said, run it out on all these people in line behind me." And it was just such a cool thing. You hear about these things. I had never been directly impacted. And the guy who's telling me this story, that was a friend of mine at work, had just gone through a divorce. His mom had died that year of cancer. He had back surgery. He just had so much going on that year. It was not a good year. He was such a happy person. He had been so down. And seeing his reaction to this free $4 coffee, he was just so happy. He was glowing. And I could still see his face. And so he walked away, and I called my mom and I told her all about it really quick. And then I immediately switched over because she was in our home, didn't have TV, and I was telling her all about it. There was a shooting this morning, Mom, and this is going on still, and it's little kids, and how could this happen? And how, I had to babysit that night, and I was like, I'm going to be crying on this little kid. And she said, "Mary, you have to focus on that coffee story you just told me. There are always going to be tragedies and horrible things that will inevitably happen in our lives and in the world, but there'll always be more good out there if you look for it." So that was kind of one of our last really big conversations that stuck with me. A few weeks later, she had surgery and passed away from her cancer. I was kind of not really prepared for it. We thought it was just kind of a routine surgery. And that time in the hospital waiting room that week, I had actually gotten together with a friend of mine in the city at the time, and we decided we were going to start focusing on the good stuff. My mom was really sick. I was still pretty naive to how bad it was, but I knew it wasn't good. She was going through a bad breakup, and I thought, let's start a Facebook page or something. Just put some happy stuff out there. And so we started one about 2 weeks before she went into the surgery. So she knew we had started a little Facebook page at least. And we just asked people to send these stories. And, if there's little moments of acts of human kindness have happened to you, or big moments, share them. And so we started sharing them. And then I ended up in the hospital that week with her and my whole family, and just realized it's needed here. In those waiting rooms, I was lucky enough to have a big family, but there was a guy in there alone in the corner. I could still see him. There was a couple that was divorced and fighting over their 30-year-old daughter who was dying, if she should see her boyfriend or not. It was just so hopeless. And there was nothing, not even a trashy magazine about the Kardashians' new nail color. And so I just thought this is where it needs to be. And so I decided I was going to take her old Subaru, and I was going to go across the country and start collecting these stories, because I'm sure, as whenever you start a project, you have that wave of momentum, and it's positive, and everyone's like, that's great, we need that more than ever, we need that. And people start sharing things, and then it just starts dying out. And it's wait, we still need it more and more now than ever. And people just, the momentum gets lost. And so that happened pretty quickly for me. And I was already depressed, and my mom had just died. And I thought, I'm not going to let this discourage me. I'm just going to go out there and find it on my own. And so I just got in the car and went. And the plan is to put it all into a book to put in hospital waiting rooms across the country.
Right. So the book will go into hospitals, which is it's such an awesome idea and so needed. It's just incredible that, and I love the little Facebook story. I didn't know that it was this Facebook page that you started, and then now it's gotten much bigger than that. So tell us, what did you find when you hit the road? Did you come away feeling that your mom was right in the end, that there is really, as your shirt says, there is more good out there in the world? Because we kind of want to know, what is it like out there?
So I'll tell you one thing, it's not as scary as they make us think. My two best friends were still in Manhattan. I had lived with them and left to go on this trip. And so they would constantly check in. One would be like, oh gosh, you're in Oklahoma, there's tornadoes today. Or one of them would be like, oh, this area, I don't know, there was a shooting, I think, this morning. It's yeah, dude, you're in New York. There was probably a shooting there too. So I think that the news kind of wraps us into this like terror. And so I never watched the news on the road. I just went and I based it on people's faces. And if they were smiling, if they looked genuine, I felt like I had a pretty good idea of being a people person and kind of gauging how people were. And so I was very fortunate. I mean, 154 homes for over 3 years. And I don't have anything bad to report back. There was definitely moments where you would stay with people and be like, I don't know if we'll stay in touch. They were great, but maybe we won't stay in touch. And there's others that, someone texted me this morning that I haven't spoken to in 2 years. So I think that there was definitely more challenging times, but never a moment where I was actually scared of a person or felt nervous myself. I think that, when my mom told me that line, she said, there'll always be these things, and there will always be bad, but there will be more good if you look for it. And I think that, if you look for it was the part that I realized at the end of the trip. Like, you have to look and you have to dig, and it's not easy. And people thought I was getting inundated with emails and, oh, I probably had 1 million followers on Instagram. I didn't have any of that. It was a success because I worked my butt off, but it wasn't a success because of an algorithm or, any of that stuff that we think defines success with our projects now. It was just a lot of hard work and a lot of digging and really just getting into these homes and kind of almost being a reminder of the good. You would start talking to people, and then by the end of your visit, they'd be like, wow, like, I just remember this happened when I was in like 10th grade, or like I had this teacher, or I had this person that like paid for all my books once, like just like these little memories that they had just forgotten. And so it was cool to kind of make these people look back on their life and really remember the good.
Yeah, Mary's our reminder of all the good out there. So tell us what it was really like, though, Mary. You stayed in people's homes, like we talked about, 154 homes. A lot of these people were strangers. They were connected. You were being connected. This was all funded. This was, funded by people and you, but, people were putting you up and you were staying in their homes. So what was that actually like for you? Staying in people's homes, like strangers that were, someone may have told you, Instagram tagged you in their post, and then in Colorado says, come here, Mary, and you don't even know them, and you're saying, I'm
like, wonderful, a bed, great. I think you're just so exhausted and tired and everything, and the whole journey was about showing that people, again, we have bad and good, all of us inside, and just like focusing on that good as much as possible to like bring it out more too with people. I think that was my least worry. Like, I just was like, why would I be afraid of people when I'm trying to tell other people not to be afraid of people? Like, it just seems kind of silly. But I will say, my last home that I stayed in Brooklyn, New York, which was, I'm like on the home stretch now, and I'm coming through, and I was very specific about where I would stay. I would say yes to everyone pretty much. But whenever someone would offer a place to stay, I wanted to stay in like a city kind of feeling in the state, but also like a small town, like, because I grew up at the end of Long Island, where it's the end of the world, it feels like. And then even as you go up on Long Island and get closer to the city, totally different. New York City, totally different. Upstate New York, totally different. So I didn't want to just go to one spot. So anyway, I'm going through Brooklyn. It's my last stop. I get to the home, total strangers that have reached out to me. And I had so many people I know in the city, but I was like, nope, has to be a total stranger. And she was French Canadian. She had been here for like 20 years, I think. She was really wonderful. I loved her. She's very unique, artistic. And so I got to her home, and she had put me downstairs in her room. And this is the thing I noticed with people. They would always, like, they put me in their room or like their bed, and they'd stay in the, I was like, what do you do? Like, not always, but it was just always like, I can just sleep on the couch. Like, they were so concerned with making sure I was comfortable, and I was a total stranger. So this woman, she was like, you stay in my room. It's downstairs, so you'll have your own space and a bathroom. And then she was cracking up. She's like, we call it the bat room, not the bathroom, because she was French Canadian. Her H's weren't very strong, so she always said the bat room. So I thought it was like, haha, funny little weird joke, whatever. Yeah, I go downstairs and I open up the bathroom. It is literally a bat room. There are like bats in little frames and like bat wallpaper and like glow in the dark bats and like old pictures of like drawn bats. And I was like,
oh my gosh.
God. I like took a video and I like sent it to my friends, and they're like, are you kidding? Like, this is where you're going to get murdered in your own home state at the end of the trip. But anyway, I thought it was hilarious. They were the best. I wasn't scared of them at all. I was just like, this is crazy.
Oh my
But,
God.
people have their things and their unique random little things. And it was just things, it's just like everyone has their stuff. But like, I don't know, the people were never scary and they were so hospitable. Like, I mean, they were like, those two women, they like made me this delicious, amazing dinner. And like, so many people, they would always feed you a warm meal. Some people would like give you a little gift bag of like some, chapstick and water bottles and granola for the car. Some of them would send me off with gas money, or I'd end up in a home right when I needed it the most. Like I'd be hearing some car trouble, which in the beginning of the trip, you'd hear car trouble and I'd be like, oh my gosh, the car's breaking down. Like the trip's over. Or I'd have like a bruise and I'd be like, I have cancer now. Like, when you're by yourself and you're traveling, it's like always worst case scenario. Then after like a year of it, the car makes a noise. I'm like, no, we'll deal with that next week. You have so much other stuff going on. So I had some car issues going on. I was like, I'll deal with that eventually. And I pull into a home in Indiana and the guy just happens to be a mechanic and like did all this work on my car.
Oh my God.
So stuff like that would happen. And
that's amazing.
Like I said, super, super challenging journey. But those moments were like those moments that affirmed the trip for me. It was like, there's got to be something going on. I don't know if my mom.
That was your mom. That was your mom making sure that the Subaru didn't break down.
Exactly.
That was totally your mom. Yeah. That's amazing. So how did you map out the trip, Mary? Because I'm just curious, like, how did you plan where you were going to go and when and like which state would be next? How did you map that all out?
So I Googled the best route across the US in the beginning, and I printed out that map. And I used that as like a really rough guide. Like I went to those states almost exactly in order of how it was, but not the areas. I think it was more based on landmarks. But I would say there wasn't really any logic in it. Like if you look at the map on my website, it's like circles and zigzags. I wouldn't say there was a lot of logic. I really just followed the story. So if I was in a place and I would reach out to someone that had, I would plug in Oklahoma, and then anyone reached out from Oklahoma, I would send a message and be like, hey, like, so I'll probably end up there next week, I think. Is the offer still standing? I mean, it maybe had been a year since they had reached out to me. They're like, where are you? And then they would just, almost always, people were like, oh yeah, absolutely, come on in. Oh my God. And I would just show up and just like fall out of my car, and we would have some dinner and tell stories. So it was very spontaneous, I would say, more so. Like it wasn't really very planned. I never had an issue finding a home. It was more so the stories. The people that hosted me were just sheltered. Of course they had stories and we would talk, but that was never why I wasn't specifically staying with my stories. I was seeking shelter, and then I would walk around the communities and talk with people and get stories. So that the story part was a lot harder. I think getting people to realize your story is important, it matters. And even if it's a tiny one, it's a big one. So I think that was more of a challenging part, but people opening their doors was the easiest part.
Yeah. And tell us, Mary, share with us just maybe a couple of the stories that maybe like impacted you a lot, even if they were small ones, just some of the stories that are going to be part of your book.
Yeah. So one of my like absolute favorite stories, which was right in the beginning of the trip, was a woman who was working at a bank like 30 years ago. And she was working at a bank. She was like in her 20s, and she had been having a really bad day. And it was visible on her face. It looked like maybe she'd been crying or something. And so a customer came in that she had never seen before, and she withdrew some money. And then she looked up at her and said, are you okay? You look like you're having a hard time. Is there anything I can do? And she was super embarrassed. She was like, oh, no, nothing some M&Ms won't fix when I get out of work later, and just like made a weird joke, and they laughed, and the lady left. And then 30 minutes later, the lady came back in and slid some M&Ms under the window to her. And it was just like, such a tiny thing, but the fact that like she went out and bought some M&Ms and then came back to bring, I think really at the end of the day, it was two reasons that was like my favorite story. One, it was so small, and I feel like when people think of an act of kindness, they're like, oh yeah, like the person that donated a kidney to a stranger. And I have those stories, and I've met those people, and they're angels walking around on earth, and it's amazing. But that doesn't have to be the only story. It can be something little. It can be something tiny, like a bag of M&Ms. And we're all capable of that. So like it's that reminder, like, oh, I can do that. Like I could be making someone's day. And here's this woman telling me this story from 30 years ago. Like she never forgot it. She told her kids and her grandkids. She's telling me, like, it just made such an impact on her. And I thought, oh, she stubbed her toe that day, or like her boyfriend maybe broke up with her. That's why she was upset. But then I talked to hundreds of thousands of people across the country, and it was like, her uncle could have died in a car accident the night before, or, her mom had cancer. Like, you don't know, and everyone is going through something serious. And it's just like, to see that tiny little thing made such an impact, and that we are able to do that too, that reminder. And also the other part is just that I think at the end of the day, the ultimate act of kindness that we can really ever do for someone else is give them time. Like, whether it's the time that you took to go to the store and get M&Ms, or the time we take to like go visit a grandparent, or answer the phone call from our annoying aunt that talks too much, or whatever we're doing, it's just taking the time to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe writing someone a note in the mail, old school.
Yeah.
Handwritten card, a letter, all those things. And just sometimes just a smile, which is free, by the way. If you smile at someone, sometimes a smile can brighten someone's day or make their day. You never know what someone's going through. But
oh my gosh,
I love the M&M story.
There was a woman in New Mexico that I talked to, and she said she was in a grocery store. This is also like 20 years ago or something, but she never forgot. She was in the store, and there was a man who was African American. He was very tall, and he was standing in the aisle next to her, and she smiled at him. And then when she walked out to her car and was getting in her car, he came out and he handed her a candy bar. And he was like, I just wanted to give you this, for your smile. Aww. And it like broke my heart, because it was just like, and she was like, it made me wonder, like, how many people actually smile at him? Are they scared? Like, it's just like these different, I walk around like Buddy the Elf, always smiling, but like, there's other people that like, it just breaks your heart. And it's just like, yeah, a smile is free. And it has such an impact on him that he bought that candy bar, like, and so it's just really cool.
Now, here we are in 2020, which has been such a challenging year for all of us, really. So what do you think your mom would say right now, like in her like good advice that she gave you about Sandy Hook, which happened here in Connecticut? What would she say to all of us and to you about 2020 and like what we should be focusing on right now during this, very uncertain, stressful, challenging times that we're living in?
Probably look up. I think right now, like, we're just all looking at our phones and the news and just freaking out. And I think that's one of the biggest things. We're so distracted right now that we're not able to see the good. Because I was walking through Chicago, I remember, on my trip, and I was responding to some emails, and it was just the only time, I was walking, I wasn't driving, I can never do anything in the car. I needed like a little like doppelganger sitting next to me, or something, like a clone, so that they could be answering emails. But so I was responding to some emails because it was the only chance I had. And all of a sudden, in the last possible second, I just looked up, and I was just passing a homeless man. He was sitting on the corner, and there was a man sitting with him in a tuxedo, and he was just sitting on the ground with him, and they were just like half hugging, talking. And it was just like one of those moments where it was like, I would have just missed that. And it was like so beautiful. Like, they were just sitting there hugging. I don't know their story. I don't know what was going on. But I think that we're so distracted because we're always missing stuff. And like on this journey, I would get into people's homes and I would say, this is what I'm doing. Do you know anyone in your community? Like, oh, I don't know. I got to think. Like, I don't know. I know it's out there. I just can't think of something right now. And then I would go out and look for it myself. And then you'd find someone down the street, 3 houses away, who's working tirelessly till 4 a.m. on a nonprofit because they lost a child. And so now they've set up a nonprofit for other families that lose babies or children so that they can pay for the funerals, because they know what it's like to go through that and how important it is to have support. And the people I'm staying with, who are absolutely wonderful people and lovely, have no idea and don't even know them. And so it's not to say that we're not all, working really hard and doing our own lives, but it's putting us in a bubble and it's preventing us from seeing what's going on. So it's not that it's not out there. It's just that you have to look, and look for it, keep looking for it, and look up, because a lot of distractions going on right now.
Yeah, I know. That's such good advice, though.
Just contribute towards the good. You can't help the bad. You can help being a good person, obviously, but if there's bad stuff going on, you can sit and wallow in your basement and be like, oh, the world's terrible, it's all bad, because that's solving something. Or you can go out and buy some of the M&Ms. So,
yep.
what do you do?
Yep. Or do the Starbucks thing, buy the person in line behind you. If you're in the drive-through or whatever, get the person's coffee behind you or in front of you, whatever it is. I think that's so good.
Yeah.
So tell us how is the book process going so far? Where are you in the book process and how is it going? Because I'm sure you just have so much,
Very overwhelming.
and it's like a lot and you have to like get it down into a coffee table book. So that's probably super challenging. So how's the process going so far and where are you in the process?
So far I finished my proposal. And so I wrote up a few sample stories of how I'd like it to kind of look in the book. So I just picked a few that really stuck in my head from the whole journey, whether it was something that happened the first week or, the last week. And there was definitely, those stories that really stick with you. And so I kind of started putting that together. But yeah, it's really daunting because it was 3 years and, it's not just, it was a road trip of kindness. I stayed with the strangers. I drove my mom's car. It was really my journey too. There were so many components. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just a road trip. It wasn't just this. It wasn't just that. And so I think kind of figuring out how much I'm going to put in this book and then what I'll maybe save for putting in my own book someday and really talking about my own journey and the people I stayed with. So I guess it's just a lot of organizing right now, which is a challenge.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a lot. And is your mom's car are you still driving your mom's car around on Long Island?
So the registration did expire towards the end of the journey. And so it's still expired. I actually, when my mom first passed away, I moved down to St. John in the Virgin Islands. Just one-way ticket, leap of faith. Thought I would just figure it out once I got there. And as lovely and glamorous as that sounds, it was definitely really, really scary. And if you're not vacationing, then it's different when you live there. So I think just figuring that whole thing out, and it was just a lot of challenges that made me realize they hitchhiked there. So at the time, like the thought from going to Manhattan to there and getting in a stranger's car was like, absolutely not. And then after a few weeks of, hiking into town a couple of miles in the 95-degree heat, I was like, maybe I'd rather get murdered. Who knows? So I started hitchhiking and I just realized, wow, these people are so nice and so welcoming. And so I think it was a really big stepping stone for me getting in the car when I was finally mentally prepared to get in the car, because it wasn't just a mental thing, it was emotional also. And so, especially when you're staying and hearing all these stories, you kind of have to have a little bit of a foundation for yourself, because I was still hurt and broken a little bit. And then going out and really being almost like an unlicensed therapist for 3 years, it was like, whoa, what did I just sign myself up for? So after the trip, I went back to St. John, and then I got quarantined there, which was a whole other set of challenges and a whole other book, really, that it became. But I did just get back. And so right now I'm just borrowing my dad's old pickup truck, but I'm in the process of getting my registration.
Okay. So you can maybe on the book tour, you can drive around. That might be really fun, right?
She's 30.
Yeah, that could be really cool. So what would you say was the biggest challenge of your journey, Mary? Because I love hearing about all the good stuff, of course, because it's good news, but I also want to know the real here. Like what was the hardest part? Not taking a shower some days, or like, give us the real story.
Oh no, it was definitely more like inside. Like I think, like as I said, I think the emotional aspect was really, really challenging.
The healing, right? The healing of losing a parent. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, in the beginning, I stayed with a family who, beautiful, blonde-haired mother, and had 2 children. And, one of the children had a bunch of special needs, and she was, had a very severe health issue to the point where she had to wear diapers. But if you saw her out with the other kid, you'd be like, oh, what a wonderful life. So being in her home and seeing that side and knowing all the challenges they were going through as a family and as she was as a mom, was such a punch in the face with perspective. So I quickly went from, being sad and woe is me to like, wow, how lucky was I that I had this mom that like inspired me to do all of this? Like what a testament to her, and just fortunate enough to have a big family. So it wasn't so much my own, it was a constant reminder, and I always wish she could know what I was doing, and I miss her all the time. But I think it was more so hearing all the other stories. I'm such a people person and I love people. And I had a really hard time, because I'm not a licensed therapist, switching gears to like not taking a lot of the pain in. So I think that like talking with families for hours about a child they lost, you know, you put out the little, I mean, I'll put out the little happy thing of what amazing thing they do now and how they help people. But I sat there for hours going through a scrapbook of their kid, crying, they're crying, we're all crying. You know, it was just doing that every single day was really, really hard. And then trying to do that balance, because throughout the 3 years, to keep my wallet alive, I did park my car about 10 times, and the people in the driveway of a nice stranger, and they would drop me at the airport, or I'd take an Uber, and I would fly back to New York for a week or two and shoot weddings to, you know, keep my business and my wallet alive. And then I'd pop back onto the road for months at a time. So whenever I would do that, it was hard. You know, you're going from, again, this tragic, crazy story that you got that morning to getting into New York and shooting a wedding with a girl in a $10,000 wedding dress with, you know, they're fighting over what napkin color they're going to do. So I think just that balance of realizing, again, like that's that moment for them. That doesn't mean that they didn't have a bunch of tragedy they went through. They're just in their moment and they're having a hard time picking their napkin color, obviously. But you know what I mean? Like, I think the balance was really, really challenging. But it was, yeah, I think that there was just so many moments of like, again, like those moments that affirmed the trip and made me realize how important it was that I was doing that it all kind of just, it was worth it.
Yeah, so worth it. Now, what was it like for you when you were featured on the Today Show? Because I loved watching you. That was so awesome. You got, I mean, you I know you had some local media that was following you in different states when you were out there on the road, but what was it like being featured on national television on the Today Show?
That was really awesome. I think that knowing that they just found me and then I just got there from working hard was definitely like a really awesome experience. It was like almost, it was like 2.5 years, I think, at that point that I had been doing this. And so when I first walked in to the studio, they had a bunch of pictures that in black and white that were kind of like all along the back wall of where we were going to sit on the couch. And I think like in that moment, it just like hit, like it was like, oh my gosh, like,
yeah, you're like, I'm doing this.
I know, I'm really doing it. And like, oh my gosh, and like, look what I did so far. And I think that's always like, sometimes it hits you. It's like, oh my gosh, like, I can't believe I did that. Because you like forget. Like, not that you forget. My legs don't forget. My body's still very angry. But you know, it's just one of those moments where it was like, and my best friend came with me. And so she was like, you know, behind the camera, people like crying. And so it was just, it was a really cool moment. But again, I literally, the second I walked out the door, they got me a car to the airport. I went right to the airport. I went right back to my car because I had just been on the show. Now the emails were coming. I had a ton of emails. I was going back to Cincinnati, Ohio. The next 4 days, I just was going from story to story to story to story to story, and then like falling in bed at night to the point where like by the 5th day I was like so sick, but I was like, I have to keep going. And so it was like you almost didn't get to really enjoy it after that because like you were just like, but it was
right back at it. Yeah, right back at it. Oh, that was so awesome. So I loved watching that. Well, so now how is wedding photography going? Because obviously, you know, 2020. So, you know, how are you? Yeah. So I know, you know, that's your gig. That's how you're paying bills and stuff. So what are you doing in lieu of wedding photography? How's that going?
So I've been doing a lot of family shoots.
Oh, great.
I did have a wedding that was supposed to be tomorrow. They just canceled like a week and a half ago and postponed to next year. But yeah, a lot of them have been kind of postponed or canceled. Well, not canceled, but well, actually some happened. But you know, like, you know, they get postponed till next year. So I started a new project because why not?
Of course you did.
When you have so much else to do. Where I'm kind of going back and highlighting bride and grooms that I've already photographed in the last 12 years. And I always take like a couple specific photos, like whether it's in front of their grandfather's tractor or in front of, you know, an old barn in our town. And so we're going back to that spot again and meeting up. And now they have kids or a dog or they're pregnant. And we're kind of doing another photo and calling it Where Now. And do little interviews with them to talk about like how you got here now and how, like, what your challenges were, because I feel like we live in this world where it's like everything is so perfect on social media, and it's like, nothing is perfect, and we're all falling apart, like literally all of us. So kind of
we are
humanizing that fall apart thing, because I think everyone's going through it, and so to make it not seem like things are just perfect and their babies just arrived, and talk a little bit more about the challenges. So that's been kind of a side project. And because I've been doing that, then they're all signing up for family shoots afterwards. And then I just had a couple of shoots in general. So
that's great. And what would you say the timeline is for your book? Would you say that we hope to have the book done in 2021? Are you hoping to have it done before the end of 2020? What's the timeline that you're thinking?
I get crazy. No, I think 2021 is a good
2021.
Yeah, I think that when
I like goals. I'm very goal oriented, Mary. So
you got to set something, otherwise.
Yeah. And all right, so 2021.
So that you can hold yourself accountable. When I started the road part, I thought it'd be a year. So 3 years later.
3 years and 31 days later. Yeah.
So I'm not being too hard on myself with the time commitment, but yeah, it is good to like kind of have like an end goal a little bit.
And I'm sure, like you said, I know you have an agent, so I'm sure your agent is like, okay, Mary, let's go on the 2021 train. That's good.
Yes.
By the way, I also think you could be like a motivational speaker. Like once the book comes out, and I don't know, as we were talking, I was like, you have so many good lessons and like seeing the positive, and I was like, I could see you giving like talks,
I connected with a journalism teacher in California, and he like asked me if I would go on into his classrooms and talk to his students, and I said yes. And after that, he blasted it out to the community all over the country, and for the next 2 years, I talked to high schools in every state, and then not like the states I had left, and then and then I went to their yearbook convention, Johnston's yearbook. So that was like 300 people, I think, that I spoke to there. They like flew me to Orlando. And then this past January, right as we were shutting down, Subaru flew me to their national conference, and that was like 700 people. And that was really cool. I got to bring my dad because it was on his birthday. And so I went and talked to them, and they all got more good shirts. So they were all wearing a more good shirt in the audience.
Yeah. Why isn't Subaru sponsoring you, by the way?
So they actually reached out to me in my last 4 states. And they were like, one of the vice presidents, and he's like, oh, like if you need a place to stay. And I didn't even know he was the vice president. I just knew he worked there, and he said, you can bring your car in to get checked on. And I was like, yes, please. Of course. I always take that offer. So, so I got to but I had said, like I'm doing this trip, and it's sponsored quite literally on human kindness, because all these people are reaching out and hosting me and offering gas money. And I wanted to keep it like that. I think it was just really important to me at that point. Had they reached out in the beginning,
but that could have been different.
By all means, I would have taken the help. But once I worked so hard, I was like, no, now this is mine and like ours, and like it's more authentic and grassroots, and I didn't want it to get taken over and change and get into anything else. So, but I will say that they did reach out. I did bring my car in. It was like a week and a half away from the engine dying, because there was like an oil spill somehow inside of it, or an oil leak. Sorry, that's not our language. And so they fixed it all up, and they gave me a rental to use for the week. And I was like leaving to another area in New Jersey, and they just gave me the rental. And then the president took me out to lunch, and the vice president hosted me. He put me on his Christmas card this year. It's like a joking Photoshop photo I sent because we got along. His wife was almost dying when I stayed with them. She got seated and got like super, super sick that summer. I was in like a horrible depression. So like the timing of a lot of the homes, honestly, but that home and me getting there, and now they like have me as a part of their family. And I jokingly sent them like a picture. It was like their family photo professionally, and then I photoshopped my face.
Oh, you're like, I'm part of the family.
And they literally like thought it was the best thing ever, and they put it on their Christmas card, and they like talked about more good. So we're really close now. And when I went to Alaska, they connected me with their people there, and they didn't have a blue Outback to give me when I got there. So the service manager literally gave me his car because he had a blue Outback. He's like a family car for 2 weeks for me to drive around 1,000 miles plus around Alaska.
That's
I didn't have to sign anything, like just, which was so much cooler again, because like that's what this was. Not like if I just got a free rental. But in Hawaii also, like just separately, because Hawaii is not the same as Subaru of America. They're like their own dealership. in the 3 islands I went to, they picked me up from the airport.
Yeah, I saw that on your Instagram. Yeah.
So like it was really cool because it was like their own individual ways of helping instead of just like a check or a stamp or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, it didn't come till the end, and then they just really were very impressed by the fact that I did it by myself. So they flew me down to speak at their event, and I'm going back again. It's probably going to be on Zoom, but I'm going back again in January to talk. They're like, we want you back every year.
Oh my God.
So that'll be really cool. But it was cool for my dad because he like was so stressed out, obviously, the whole entire trip. I called him every day at 6:00. And so for him to get to sit there, and like I didn't tell him a lot of the stories. I was like, yeah, I'm safe, I'm alive, how are you? And like didn't want to tell him too much, didn't want to freak him out. So for him to get to hear the stories and like see all of it was really, really cool.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Yeah,
that's the picture. That's like the only picture I have right now. Like I wish I could take it down, but it's like super glue. But there's like a picture of all the people from Subaru and their market.
Oh, that's Subaru. Okay. Oh, that's so cool. I think I saw that on your Instagram. Was that Hawaii?
That was in Orlando at the conference.
Orlando. Oh, at the conference. Right. Oh my God.
My dad's like in the front. She's like
so cool. He's like, oh, that's my daughter. She's like famous. Tell us where we can find you on Instagram and all the things so everyone can follow you and the More Good journey.
Yeah, so it's More Good Today on Facebook and on Instagram, and then moregoodtoday.com for the website.
Okay, good. And I'll put all of that information into the show notes. And I can't wait to get your book in 2021. And I do think that in 2020, just, focusing on the fact that there is more good out there than we realize. And we're going to look up, Mary. I'm going to think about you often and especially when I'm out walking. Sometimes I catch myself on a walk, whether I'm with my dog or I'm out exercising and I'm on my phone, and I'll look up and see something. And that's when I'm like, what am I doing? I should be looking. So good advice. I'm going to take it. I hope everyone will join me in that. And I just want you to know we're all so blown away by you and your mission. And I know your mom is so proud of you. And I'm sure she just thinks that everything you're doing is so incredible and so needed and so important right now. So it's weird how the timing is working out too with what we're all going through. So I think maybe there's a connection there too. I don't know, but just want you to know you're making an impact, and I think it's so incredible. I'm so glad we got to connect.
Yes, me too. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's the Army. We got to stay connected. Support each other.
We will. Well, thanks for sharing your good news, Mary, and we can't wait to follow along as the book unfolds. So thanks again, Mary.
Thank you for having me.